Sometimes the most confusing moment in a relationship is not when someone leaves, it's when someone was just close to you, and then something inside them seems to pull away. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no argument, no obvious reason for distance, just a quiet shift. The connection that once felt warm begins to feel uncertain. Messages become slower. The tone becomes more reserved, and the closeness that once felt natural suddenly feels harder to reach. For the person experiencing this from the outside, it can feel deeply confusing. Because just days earlier, everything seemed to be moving in a meaningful direction. The conversations were deeper. The emotional openness felt genuine. There were moments where it seemed like something real was forming between the two of you. But then, almost unexpectedly, the energy changes. And when that change appears without explanation, the mind immediately searches for answers. Did I do something wrong? Did I move too fast? Did the connection mean something different to him than it meant to me? These questions are common when someone pulls back after closeness. But sometimes the reason for that shift lies deeper than anything that happened between two people. Because emotional closeness can awaken something powerful inside a person. It awakens vulnerability. And vulnerability changes how we experience connection. At the beginning of a relationship, emotions feel manageable. There is attraction, curiosity, excitement, but very little emotional risk. If the connection fades, life continues. Nothing deeply personal has been placed at stake yet. But when emotional closeness appears, the situation changes. Another person suddenly becomes important. Their presence begins to affect how you feel. Their attention matters. Their absence matters. And if someone is not used to sharing emotional space with another person, that shift can feel overwhelming. Not because the connection is unwanted, but because the emotional impact of the connection feels unfamiliar. For someone who has spent much of their life relying on independence, strong emotional attachment can feel destabilizing. It introduces unpredictability. It introduces emotional exposure. And exposure can feel uncomfortable for someone who has learned to protect their emotional world carefully. So when closeness appears suddenly, the instinct to regain control may appear just as suddenly. That instinct often looks like distance, not complete disappearance, not rejection, just a subtle step back, a moment of space, a pause. From the outside, that pause can feel painful, because it arrives right after the connection seemed to deepen. But from the inside, that pause may feel necessary, a moment to understand emotions that suddenly became stronger than expected. Inside that moment of distance, several emotions may be happening at once. Part of him may still feel drawn toward the connection, the warmth, the understanding, the feeling of being emotionally seen. But another part may feel uncertain, because meaningful connections carry emotional weight, and emotional weight introduces responsibility. Responsibility for another person's feelings, responsibility for emotional presence, responsibility for the possibility that the relationship could grow deeper. For someone who is not used to that level of emotional involvement, those responsibilities can feel heavy. So instead of moving forward immediately, the mind searches for balance. Distance becomes the tool for restoring that balance. Space allows someone to observe their feelings without the intensity of constant closeness. It allows them to reconnect with the independence they feel comfortable with. From their perspective, this distance can feel healthy, a way to prevent emotions from moving too quickly. But from the outside, it can look like emotional withdrawal, because the same closeness that once felt effortless now feels guarded. Communication becomes more cautious, emotional openness becomes quieter. And that contrast can create doubt, because when someone steps back after closeness, it can feel like rejection. But in many cases, the situation is more complex. The connection may still matter deeply. The feelings may still be present. But the emotional intensity may feel difficult to manage without pauses. So distance becomes a temporary form of protection. protection from emotions that feel unfamiliar, protection from vulnerability that feels difficult to navigate, and protection from the possibility of caring more deeply than someone feels ready for. This is why someone can feel close to you one moment and then seem distant the next. Not because the connection disappeared, but because the connection became meaningful enough to activate emotions that require time to understand. Meaningful connections often awaken parts of ourselves that we are still learning to navigate. And when those emotions appear suddenly, people sometimes step back. Not because they want to lose the connection, but because they need time to learn how to hold it, time to understand it, and time to decide whether they are ready to move deeper into something that has already begun to matter.